All right, and welcome to the Automation Insider. I'm your host, Joe McGrath, and we have coffee cups now, so I'm pretty pumped about that. Today, I wanted to take some time to talk about stuff beyond the barcode, as it were, and get into how warehouse efficiency can be generated through the use of proper integration, specifically software integration. So in my quest to learn more about this, I thought who better to ask than Naomi. Naomi, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I'm really excited to be here. Nice to meet all of you. Thanks for joining us. So a little bit about myself, Joe. So I've worked across really a range of different software ecosystems and channels over the last 12 plus years. You know, that might age me a little bit, but really helping partners and customers find those right solutions. And with that, making sure those systems and solutions actually work together, right? And are the right fit. So whether it's like your warehouse technology, whether it's the ERP or just the integrations in between them, that's really my focus on finding that real value.
Yeah, you know, it's one thing to have a couple of cool pieces of technology and in your head they work together. I know I make concepts all the time, so we'll start with process and we'll have all the technologies that we've selected. But in most cases, they have to interact and they have to talk. And how do they do that? And it's it sounds real simple when you're talking about a process map, but in practice, it can be extremely tricky, and it is maybe one of the most important kind of components of a good integration. So talk to me about let's just kind of do some groundwork. What is, when we say a software integration, like what does that mean? Like what are the kind of tactical components that I need to think about?
Well, in terms of just integration in general or software integration, especially if we tie it, into your warehouse itself, imagine like running into a warehouse where every system is on a different page, right? So having like a team where no one can agree on that game plan, it's absolute chaos, completely chaos, right? So integrations really in general are the key because today's businesses, think of like the Amazon effect, right? You need to be fast, right? You want it now. You want it efficient. Everything needs to be in sync. And without it, basically you're operating in the dark. So without it, you've got think of like outdated data. You're doing like all these manual entries, which is absolutely hideous, right? And then there's errors because of those entries, because it's all manual and the systems aren't talking to each other. So it's kind of like, I always think of it as using a GPS and a map all at the same time. And you're trying to get somewhere, but you're really going to waste a lot of time doing it, like the old map days, right? So integration really can just help everyone get to the same place a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I think maybe a good tactical example I was kind of thinking of on the fly there is, let's say we have a location with some items in it. If the systems don't agree on where that location is and how many items are in it, picking them is going to be really, really difficult, right? Is it empty? Is it full? I think everybody's come across something in a WMS where like the inventory was wrong and maybe there was a sync issue or maybe something wasn't integrated properly to update that. So, there's that and 1,000 other examples why this is really a pretty paramount thing to get right. Okay. So what happens, when systems don't talk? I guess we hit on it a little bit, but.
Yeah, there's a lot more I can share, Joe, when systems don't talk. Honestly, it's a hot mess, right? A complete hot mess. So if your systems are really not in sync, if they're not talking, think of running a relay race and each runner is on a different team. No one knows where anyone's going, With that, like when I think of it from a software component piece, like think of data silos, right? Teams, all your teams, your finance team, your warehouse team, they're all operating in isolation. And nobody knows, hey, what's going on, right? So there's a lot of misinformation, different information, and it's not real time. So it is like a recipe for disaster, really. So think of it, and I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. Like I did mention a little bit on that double entry. So if you're entering the same data into multiple systems, it's like you're stuck in this loop, this sink, and it's no fun. But outside of not being fun, it's just not a really good business practice. So decisions really today are made on real-time information. So if you're making decisions based off of old data or even yesterday's information, you are going to make some really bad decisions. And then it's just in general operations. If you don't have them integrated, it's super slow. Maybe you're missing service level agreements, right? Overall, it's really a complete nightmare.
Yeah. Not knowing if you should purchase more. It's almost like an integration between like an ERP or a procurement system and the warehouse. Like, do we have enough units? How many units do we have? Like, that's a crazy thing to not know. Maybe 30 or 40 years ago, that would have maybe been part of the course, but now it is absolutely expected. We know exactly where all the units are. And we design all of our systems with that understanding as like kind of a basis. And within the building, like, at the beginning of my career, I'd been in some operations where people would like manually call for a replen. And looking back on it, I can't believe we used to do that. But we'd say, hey, this location's empty. Let me go find a replenishment guy and have him bring a pallet down. Like, they would go tell him. Instead of the system already knew there wasn't anything in there.
Right? Hey, can you go in the back room? Right? Go in the back room, take a look. Do we have any more of these items available?
At the shoe store, like, they never have my size. There's no back room. Yeah. So like, but over time, like the more systems have integrated, the more like we find it like crazy that wouldn't be true. Yeah, totally. What like kind of other, so beyond like just, we don't know, and we're making some inefficient, moves, or we're kind of guessing, what other challenges do we see without integration? Like if we have a poorly integrated system?
Yeah. And I'm going to reference that, Joe, to a little bit more on the lines of like maybe the different systems themselves, and not having that integrated. So I know we focus a little bit within the warehouse itself, but for one, like when you have many systems that are not integrated, so think of it, multiple systems, right? Multiple platforms, and each of them have a different interface. And so there's a lot of different people that are trying to make sense of it all. So it's like having all these different apps, right, that a person has, and they're all trying to do the same thing. So really, outside of that, the cost of managing like custom connections. So if you don't have your systems integrated, and if you do, and you have a bunch of custom connections too, like that in itself is super costly to maintain.
Define a custom connection. What would that look like to me?
More so if it's a connection that is built on some type of an API versus, let's say, an iPass. So an API type custom has a lot of like development and coding that goes into it. Whereas let's say you're using an iPass, it's really a more configuration versus development. So it's a lot easier to be able to add on other third-party apps. Maybe you're integrating your ERP. Maybe there's a ton of different applications really that you can connect without needing a developer or having to code it all out custom. And then outside of that, if you're upgrading, right, all of software, think of it, you need to update, you need to upgrade. And if you have custom connections, doing so is a nightmare. Like you have to involve like experts and partners and all, to make it happen.
I can barely go through someone else's Excel spreadsheets. Software engineers that can go through someone else's code, I think it takes a special person.
Right.
It may not be me.
Right. I kind of think of it, like when you talk transactional wise, it's like when you hit that send button in your email and then it doesn't send and you're like waiting 10 minutes for it to be delivered and it just doesn't work. So sometimes having, when you're managing all these custom integrations without that real-time visibility and just with the multiple interfaces, it's just completely disjointed. So that's where, in terms of having your integrations, having like that, an iPass integration is really key for a modern system setup for today.
So we have some all kinds of different ways to integrate systems. Lots of different software, lots of technology that brings its own software along for the ride. I know there's some operations we're working on where there's 4 or 5 different technologies on our side that we've bought to integrate, and the customer has, I don't know, 3 to 5 different pieces of software they have to get information from sometimes. So how do we do this without getting into all these bespoke APIs and trying to shop for like some is the product I need out there? Like what do we do? Like what's the solution typically?
Yeah, and I might be a little biased here, but so IntraOne, which is a software platform, it's actually a tier 1 full stack software platform, and it integrates everything. So within the software itself, so you have your WMS, your WES, your WCS, and TMS. And I'll talk a little bit more about what each of those are, but it's all on a single platform. So instead of trying to, have 5 different tools, 5 different interfaces, we have everything on one platform working under one umbrella all together in like harmony. So kind of going back to like, okay, what is all these different W's, right? It's confusing. But WMS, really, you can kind of think of it, it's like the brain of the operation. So when you're talking about like handling inventory or lack of inventory, right? Or orders and labor, that's really what makes up your WMS. And then the WES is kind of like, think of it as like a traffic controller where it's managing all of the workflows. It's prioritizing those tasks. And then WCS, so that's going to be more of like your robots, right? It's like your warehouse robot whisperer. I don't know, right? So it's controlling all the physical machines.
So just real quick for anyone following along at home. So WMS is a warehouse management system. WES is a warehouse execution system. And that particular acronym has been like evolving a lot in the last 5 years, I'd say. And then WCS is a warehouse control system. And I think traditionally folks call that controls, but it's more than that today, I'd say. I think it's a lot more.
Yeah, it really is. But like, and I think you nailed it there, Joe, too. Like there's a lot of confusion within all the different W's and really what does that truly mean? And I think we all have a different meaning for it. At the end of the day, though, it's about the functionality. Like what are we needing to do and how do we make it happen? And of course, integrations is a big piece of it. But yeah, that's kind of, yeah, you got that right.
IntraOne's going to act like, I think, a hub in a sense, right? And this is in my experience what I've seen. But we have all these different technologies we've designed a system to work with, and a lot of technology might have 2 or 3 pieces of software associated with it. Like it's not like just tell the robot what to do and it does it. That robot has to understand traffic. It has to understand its environment. It has to understand what inventory it might be able to interact with and what the rules are for that. Right. It might have to understand a safety system that's external to itself. So there's all kinds of stuff. So I think in general, like IntraOne has let me, and this is what it looks like to just a process guy, just plug everything in to one box, and then, let it ride. And I've oversimplified to an astounding degree, but like, can you explain that process a little bit? Like what does it take to hook all this stuff up?
Yeah, right. It's not as easy as just like plugging it in, but hey, it can be if you have the right tools and the right people, and that's kind of, but using the integration hub. So IntraOne has an integration hub, and that's where I talked about having your WMS, ES, CS. We missed the TMS piece, but that's kind of
transportation management system. Yeah.
Yes. And that's kind of the fun stuff, right? Where it's bridging what's going on in the warehouse and getting it to the customer. So like shipping and all of that. So that's part of the solution as well. But going back to like the integration hub itself, that's really how all of these systems are talking to each other in like real time. And so again, you're never stuck like trying to figure out, hey, what's really happening? But outside of that, it's not only connecting everything within in the warehouse itself, but it's also connecting other systems, other platforms. So think of like your ERPs. So like your Dynamics 365, SAP, NetSuite, and those are just a few. We are ERP agnostic. So that's the really nice thing with the integration hub, with the iPass. It can be configured and really can connect to any ERP itself. And then outside of that, like e-commerce, right? We all like to shop, right? Well, at least from a Lummy's perspective, I like to shop. So e-commerce, so your Shopify, your Magento, we can connect that with the integration hub. And again, then it's all going to talk together. And thinking of just warehouse in itself, EDI is another popular one that we seem to connect a lot to. And that's like your true commerce. And the other one that I was trying to think of. So yeah, I mean, high level, those would be, I think, are the major ones. Of course, there's other platforms, that
you get homegrown stuff too that I've stumbled across. It'll be, maybe it started as DAX, but it's turned into something else, or we've had this. It's always happens. Like we've had our system for 42 years or whatever, and we're not going to change it. Can you connect to that?
Yeah. So that's actually a good point, Joe, and I kind of missed that. I can't believe I missed that. Yes. So not only can we connect
it out because it's something. No.
Yes, we can. So if you have like a homegrown setup like that, again, having the right tool to be able to do so, we can connect to that. Another thing, that we're seeing a lot of is maybe you already have your WMS in place, right? You implemented that years ago. Why would you want to rip it out? You don't have to.
Yeah, you put Blue Yonder or Manhattan or High Jump. If it's in there, like it probably was a lot of kicking and screaming to get it in, and it is doing probably excellent things for you. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I think applies very well to WMS.
Yes, exactly, Joe. It does. And I'm sure, these organizations spent a good investment getting all of that up and running. So leave it. Don't rip it out. We don't want you to. We can interface with your existing WMS. So maybe it's custom, right? Maybe it's Manhattan. Maybe it's Blue Yonder. We have customers where we've implemented with all of them. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of ability to scale. So as you're looking to grow, maybe add on different components, add on those robots as we see all over. You can do that very easily. You're setting yourself up for like a future-proof type system with the integration.
So this is a little left field, and I've explored this a little bit myself, but I figured let's ask a pro. But so sometimes you have a WMS, and maybe it doesn't have all the functionality you need. Maybe it was like a homegrown thing that you're going to keep, but it doesn't do X, Y, or Z. Or it was an ERP's like warehouse management module, but it doesn't do a lot. Or like you don't really want to pay the change order to somebody like a some of the big software providers. The change orders are pretty staggering. So like, is there a way that like we can like have the WES kind of compete in that realm, or like add some functionality without replacing the WMS, like do some WMS looking things? Like is that an option?
Yeah, it actually is. And so when we integrate IntraOne, when we implement IntraOne, we're literally implementing it all. So let's take all the W's out of it, right? Because that's super confusing. I know it is for me, all these W's. Take out the W's. Let's just talk about functionality, right? We're going to implement everything. And then we can just turn on wherever those gaps are. Like you said, Joe, maybe there's cartonization, or maybe, there's license plating, or whatever it is that you're needing. And we can just turn it on. You just turn on the switch, right? It's there.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. So you can augment like the existing software package without a whole lot of extra drama. So that's an excellent thing to know if you're ever designing a system. Like, so you didn't need cartonization for the last 10 years, but now with your new technology, you got to know how big the box is before you start picking. Like that's a kind of a quantum leap in like how you got to think of the system. And it's awesome to know that there's some ways to get to that very quickly. All right. So what kind of real world examples are out there for folks to noodle on, as far as like having like one piece of software they can integrate everything into, and it does all this for you?
Yeah. Let me I'm going to share with you, we have a customer that we implemented. They're running IntraOne, and they're using Oracle as their ERP. But again, we are ERP agnostic, so that really doesn't make a difference. But I just want to kind of share the real example. So Blue Star, they are a global distributor. They have 49 locations.
Yep.
And when they came to us, so they were dealing with, so they did a lot of like temporary labor to try to meet seasonal demands or high volume demands. And so with that, they also had a lot of like inefficiencies. So once we were able to implement Blue Star, and we ended up, just so you know, if we go back to all these W's, right? So we implemented WMS, WES, WCS. And after everything was up and running and implemented, we actually we reduced that temporary labor dependency from 33% that they were using prior to just right around 13-14%. So they saw a huge reduction in that need for that temporary labor, which in itself is saving them money.
And that was because that the integration was just like kind of unclear. It just generated extra work that didn't really need to be done. Is that the idea?
Yeah. Well, and then think of it too, like even just the cost of implementing the software and getting everything up and running and integrated, you're going to get that back, right? Just within the ROIs itself within a short time. So, the other thing too, they saw a 7% reduction in actually in orders processed. So they reduced their full-time staff employee count by 15. So they literally cut all of their cost per orders by 9%.
Oh, interesting. So same number of orders, it just takes less to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty I don't see that metric in every customer, but the folks that track that are very serious about like cost per order, CPO, and a lot of times when we design systems, our target is to optimize cost per order. So it's a tricky one.
Really, and all of that happened because of the power of integration. It goes back to integrations, right? So it's not always about efficiency. It's about really that real bottom line impact. Like, how did it help them? And as we just talked about, it was pretty powerful, quite valuable.
I think a lot of times we see, we'll put in some really cool technology, some awesome robots doing cool stuff, and it's easy to see how that would help you like save labor or improve SLAs. But I think maybe like a hidden sort of thing is just having clean data that is reliable. Like if you're not cycle counting as often, or if the product is always right when you show up to a location, or if you were able to consolidate an order that previously you would have had to pick two separate orders and ship them, like all of these things are like, they cost lots and lots of money. But it's not an obvious, like it's not the vanilla path that everybody checks when they're doing their industrial engineering, surveys. And these are all like, it's not cool robots solving these problems. It's, I don't want to say boring software stuff, but like it's just having clean, good, clean living with your data. It fixes all that. And it's a big win for a lot of companies.
Right. It really is, Joe. And two, I think one other piece that we briefly touched on that I think is super important, like businesses, they're looking for growth, right? That's the whole point. But if they're not setting themselves up with the right foundation for growth, how do they do that? So when you think of integrations themselves, it isn't just about saving time, because it will save time, right? It'll make it more efficient. But it's more than that. It's like future-proofing your business. So when everything is integrated, you're getting real-time visibility. That in itself, you're able to make smarter decisions. Plus, then as you grow, it's really easy to add in that automation, to add in those robotics. So you're going to be able to just grow without having to start over. You're building that foundation for growth. So I think that's another really important piece.
I know when I do a lot of concepting, one major thing that like at least the folks I work with at Hy-Tek, it's always what phases are we going to build in, or what future planning can we think of kind of day one. And a lot of times, like, we'll design a system for maybe 20 years out, some unreasonable amount of time, right? But that helps us think about, like, what could happen in the future, and we leave the door open. So, you know, a lot of times my biggest challenge is like space planning for something like that, right? But it's because I typically know that, like, software, like, if I just let them know, you know, what's going on, like, they can plan the connections and understand, you know, what that's going to take in the future. And so that part, honestly, is like a little bit easier for me. Just knowing that I have something I can hook anything up to in the future. Yeah. I just gotta have space for it.
True. Well, we can build up. You know, you can build up in the warehouse too.
Until we hit the roof. We've done that. Okay, so what kind of words of advice do you have for folks that are kind of searching, doing their, like, homework right now on software, and trying to figure out where they want to be?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're looking or considering, like, integrations, considering really, you know, creating those efficiencies within the warehouse itself, I would say make sure first that you're dealing with the right team and that you're architecting the right solution for your business. It's not like a one size fits all type thing, right? And that's where Hy-Tek comes in. Like, we do have the consultants, we have our strategic services team where we can go in and have the experts, the practitioners that can look at, hey, your business, which is unique, every business is a little bit different, and translate that into, like, a tailored solution design specific for you. So that's where I recommend is really kind of, and then thinking about, like, hey, where are my gaps? What are my pain points? What does all of that look like? And as we have conversations, you know, within our teams itself, we're going to be able to take all of that and put that into really scoping out what's going to be best for you and your team. So it's outside of even just thinking of software, right? We need the software, we need the integrations, but there's so much more to that. The planning, the designing, like, hey, are you looking to add another warehouse? Hey, are you looking, like, what does your business look like 5 years from now? There's so much that goes into it. And that's really where having the right team to take everything and build that scope is crucial.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, you know, I often try to think of designing an operation in terms of, like, designing a process. Like, we're going to have what's the optimal process for us today, right? We know what needs to be in this building. So how do we do that to the best? And then everything else needs to support that, right? So we find technology that supports that, and we find software that supports that. And the more we can connect to a piece of software, the easier it is to integrate, the closer we can get to that ideal process in the end. And I think that's a pretty big deal. Anybody who's ever had to make a compromise on a design, like, knows the heartache that kind of goes along with that.
Right.
It's very cool. All right. Well, Naomi, thank you very much for taking some time and talking through integration with me. Got some interesting statistics out of it. And I think, you know, everybody's going to be a little bit more comfortable with what that market looks like. And I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Well, Jill, thanks. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
For everybody watching at home, check me out on Spotify or iTunes or anywhere you can download podcasts. I'll be there. And we're also on YouTube. So go ahead and subscribe and follow us. Thanks.